mind if you could just mute yourself, just so we don't get any feedback or anything like that in the background. Also, just you can turn your cameras off for now. A couple of things just to add. If we could keep the questions to the end, that would be perfect, just so I can get through the presentation, and then I'll make sure that there is plenty of time to ask questions if you've got perhaps a specific interest in air traffic, or even just want to know a little bit about my background. That is not a problem. I will add, I am currently at my squadron, so if you hear any weird noises, that's probably just the cadets going past outside. I'm sure you're all aware of how that is. Hopefully there should be no reason for me to run out of the building. But that should cover all of that. If there are any technical problems or anything's not coming up like you're expecting, or the presentation, I'm sounding like I'm moving onto a different slide and it's not moving, please give me a shout and then I'll make sure that I fix it for you. So welcome to this week's talk on why STEM. My name is Emelia Jones, and that's more of an outside of cadets. That's what you'll hear me referred to as, whereas in cadets, I'm Flying Officer Jones. I am from 106 Orset 100 Squadron over in Essex. So I wonder if there's many Essex people on this talk at the moment. It'd be great to see if any of you are. And I'm just going to give you a bit of an insight, firstly, into my cadet career. So pretty much how I got to where I am now. And then I want to give you a bit of an insight into air traffic control and what we actually mean by the term. All right. So yeah, I'm going to start with my cadet career. Hopefully this changes the slide for all of you, and you'll see a lovely photo of me when I was being enrolled. Now this was admittedly some time ago. So I joined cadets when I was 13, must have been 13 and a half, just before Remembrance Parade. Now, the reason I joined, I always had a bit of an interest in aviation, but it was actually my dad that encouraged me to join. He was in the RAF when he was a little bit younger, or definitely younger than that photo. And from that, probably very similar to most of you, grew up going to air shows, and it kind of led to that interest. And we knew a couple of people that had joined, and we thought, why not? Now, from there, I pretty much signed up to every single activity that I possibly could since joining. I did absolutely everything from drill, first aid. I tried to do a bit of shooting, but I wasn't very good at it. And it was more the aviation side of things that really took my interest. Now, I was quite lucky when I first joined. I managed to do a bit of gliding, and this is actually in a powered glider when we back when we had these. And from that moment, I was like, wow, this is awesome. And hopefully quite a few of you have also had an opportunity to do either powered flying or flying with VGS. So just doing some gliding, or even some of you might have been on the simulators and that sparked your interest. And what I would say is don't ever lose that interest, because it's an awesome, awesome career and industry to really get involved in. Now, so that's what initially sparked my interest, and I kind of took every opportunity I could to keep developing that. I signed up to every camp I could. Now, this is actually a photo from the first ever National Air and Space Camp. Yes, I was there when there was only that many cadets. For those of you that know National Air and Space Camp now, it is a lot bigger than this. Okay, so this was just the introduction one. And it was actually quite a turning point in my cadet career, actually. It allowed me to start looking into the actual aviation side of how I could develop my skills and my knowledge a little bit further. It was the first time I actually came across any QAIs. Now, some of you won't know that term, but those are qualified aerospace instructors. So cadets like yourself from the age of 16 who are really passionate into aviation and perhaps even instructing, it gives you an opportunity to develop a little bit further. Now, I will delve a little bit more into that, but it was actually meeting some of those QAIs on that camp that made me think, oh, there's an opportunity here that I really want to get involved in. And for those of you that haven't done National Air and Space Camp, hopefully you've all heard of it. Definitely get yourselves on it. It's an awesome opportunity. and gives you access to a lot of different lines of different careers within aviation, and different routes you can take. And it's really, really eye-opening, and could even show you a new career that you hadn't even thought of. Now, I kept going to every single camp that I possibly could. I kept trying to open doors to whatever I could. Now, I then came across what was then the ACPS. So it was the initial flying scholarship, which has changed in recent years. Now, I'm aware that it is now done at Lucas, but at the time I went to Dundee. It was a 2-week course to make you go solo and do it in, you get 12 hours of flying time. Now, I absolutely fell in love with flying at this kind of time in my cadet career. That feeling of just being able to take those controls, and just the feeling of flight is incredible. And hopefully, as I've said before, hopefully a lot of you have experienced that. But also, if you did, push yourself to see if there is an opportunity to get yourself onto that scholarship, because it is incredible and it can really open doors even more so. All right. So with the scholarship, for those of you that aren't aware, and I'm sure that it's very similar to the current one from when I did it. So to go solo, you need to do various ground school whilst you're there. You'll cover all sorts of air law, some basic principles of flight to make sure that you're kind of aware of what you're actually in control of. You'll look at some basic radio telephony, so that's speaking to air traffic control, and all of the procedures that go with that. All right. Now, when you go on these scholarships, make sure that you are committed to the cause. You're not there just to have a jolly for a couple of weeks and mess around with mates. You're there to get your head down and really achieve something. Because if you do well on this scholarship, there are more opportunities, which I will come on to. So beyond that scholarship, I was actually really fortunate into getting a place for a PPL scholarship. Now, that's a private pilot's license, so that's completely different from just cadets. This is an actual recognised qualification in terms of flying, which means I could go to any kind of flying school and I could say, can I hire this single engine piston aircraft? They'll do a tech flight and then I can go. Okay, now that is a 45-hour course. 45 hours you need to have under your belt. Now, your initial scholarship will cover some of that, but it is some of the best moments of my cadet career was going back up to Dundee and doing that. Now, I hope, I have to admit, I'm not 100% certain if they are still doing this, but I don't see why it wouldn't be happening. So hopefully those opportunities are still out there. And what I would say to each and every one of you is make sure that you keep your eyes peeled for these opportunities. And every time you do have the opportunity to perhaps do a scholarship or anything like that, take it, do it as well as you can, because you don't know what scholarship that's going to open up for you next. All right. So yeah, I went and did my my full PPL. I got it when I was 17 or 18. Gosh, the years are flying by. I think it was 18. So it was around the time I also learnt how to drive. So it all came within a couple of months of each other, which is pretty crazy when you think about it. But there's nothing stopping any one of you also achieving that. So aside from this, I spoke about QAIs. Now, the Qualified Aerospace Instructors course is another one of those moments in my cadet career that really, really opened doors and changed things for me. Now, in its current capacity, there is a pause, unfortunately, and I'm sure most of you are aware of this, but it is coming back. I can 100% confirm that. And I can confirm that because I am part of the staffing team with Quake. But in its current capacity, there's one course that runs in 2 places. You have the North course and the South course. Now, I partook and am still part of the staffing team on the South course down at Boscombe Down. All right, and it goes from September all the way till March or April the following year. And it is pretty intense. You're studying everything from aerodynamics to air power to, we did some basic leadership. You're going to look at flight, basic like principles of flight, and actual some flying skills. And from that, they will then develop your abilities within those fields to also then allow you to teach it to the next generation. All right. So some of you will recognize the blue lanyard as those who've completed Quake. And not only is it incredible for building those skills and developing your knowledge of aviation even further, but it also opens doors to networking with people in that industry. The kind of people that come to the mess nights, the kind of people that could offer you a job which will sort you out for life. Okay, these kind of qualifications, although it just being a cadet one, putting it on your CV, I've spoken to numerous cadets who have said having that on their CV has actually got them interviews. People have seen it written down and said, wow, that's a really, really interesting course. That sounds really cool. Tell me more about it. What did you do? And ironically, I've forgotten one of the main ones for me, which they also teach you all about air traffic, which is something that we don't see in cadets too much, unfortunately. A lot of us are so focused on the flying side that we forget about the all-important air traffic. So we do actually teach air traffic on the course. We teach you all the basics, and then to the point where you're able to instruct younger cadets. We also, with Quake, once you've been signed off as a QAI, we then push you into the real world, get you involved at RIAT, at National Air and Space Camp, teaching the next generation. Okay, and there are a lot of exciting plans. So what I would say to any of you that are perhaps interested in aviation, you know that's a career you want to take, or even you're just still wondering the exact path you should take, have a look at Quake, get yourself signed up as soon as those application forms come out, because it was absolutely incredible when I did it, for sure. So beyond Quake, I was actually really fortunate that because of the amount of effort that I'd put into the organisation, that it opened the door to me winning what was then the ATC 75 sword. Slightly different to how we do it these days. There was a bit of a change after COVID, but it's essentially one of the top cadets in the Corps. All right, and there's the famous blue lanyard there, which I am modelling for you all. So yep, that was me as a little cadet, and I would say the proudest moment of my life, still to date, was winning that sword. Okay, and there's nothing stopping any one of you from achieving that, but all you have to do is keep putting the effort in and signing yourself up to everything. I know we all say that, but that is what got me there. And then from that, it's a bit of a domino effect. The more you sign up, the further you'll go, the more camps you'll do, the more achievements you'll get, and the more places you'll get invited to. So from that experience, I was invited to do all sorts of speeches at Oyster Fests. I went on the International Air Cadet Exchange. I met Tim Peake, a very famous astronaut, and all sorts like that. I've been to various government events. I've been to Parliament. Yeah, so many awesome things, which you don't even realise are happening, but it's for you to get involved and keep your eyes peeled. I think in my time, I once tried to tally it up. I think I went to 25 camps. I went abroad 5 times, I think including America, Belgium, Sweden, Turkey, and Gibraltar. And that's not all just because I won the sword. That was way beyond, way before all of that happened, that I started putting in that effort. And then the more you do, the more opportunities you'll get, for sure. Now, hopefully it doesn't sound like I'm just trying to sell you what my cadet career was like. I know things are very different, but all the fundamentals are all the same. And if it wasn't for all of these experiences, then I definitely wouldn't be in the place that I am today. So I already briefly mentioned, this is me right now. I'm the training officer at 106 Orset 100 Squadron. I should say, and I should give credit to 1483 Brentwood Squadron as well. That's where I was a cadet initially. And then when I aged out, I decided when I went back into uniform, well, when I jumped from cadet to staff, I decided that I would go to a new squadron to find my feet. And so that's how I ended up at 106. But as I said, alongside that, I also do quake, and I assist with anything aviation that I can, because that truly, truly is my passion. But the more interesting side of this, I would say, is what happened after I aged out and how I got involved in air traffic. Now, after leaving school, I decided university is not for me. It wasn't going to get me into a career that I was passionate about. I was always, perhaps like many of you, interested in flying, and even more so interested in the military side of things. So I thought I would get an application in with the military. And in the meantime, I decided to become cabin crew with British Airways, which was incredibly fulfilling. And it was a great way to get actually into the civilian world of aviation and to open my eyes to perhaps other elements I hadn't considered. Now, this was really important in my development because it allowed me to see how the commercial world was run. And I decided, whilst I was cabin crew, that perhaps a big industry like the civil side of flying, it wasn't really my cup of tea. Of course, I loved being on holiday basically all the time. That's how I felt, but it wasn't the job that ticked all of the boxes for me. So I continued with my military applications at the same time, and for various reasons, they didn't work out. But I'm a very strong believer in everything happens for a reason. Now, after being cabin crew for a while, COVID came in, and I got furloughed for a while, which once again gave me a long opportunity to think about perhaps the career option I wanted, and let this be perhaps a story for all of you to just realize that even when you're 20 or even older, I would say I was probably about 21 around this time, you don't need to know exactly what career you want to do, okay? And whether you decide to use your time at uni to decide where you want to end up in life, or you perhaps want to get a job and start making money, don't feel pressured, okay? Always keep your options open. Make sure that you give yourself opportunities to explore those different fields that perhaps you have an interest in, okay? So the military side didn't work out, and the civilian side of aviation wasn't my cup of tea. And I was loving doing my flying as a hobby. I knew that I didn't want to mix my hobby. And it was actually after this job role, I started looking to see, okay, what is the job role out there? And that's when I had these moments where I thought back to Quake, and I thought back to all the air traffic control that I did there, and I thought, you know what, a career in air traffic, perhaps that's the one. You know, that was really interesting. And I started to explore those options, and that's how I ended up at Biggin Hill. So this is me today. I started off as an air traffic control assistant, or an air traffic services assistant, hence ATSA. Yes, I started as that. So that's perhaps running the admin side of things, looking at assisting with the controllers, basically making their life as simple as possible. And then my work saw potential in me, and they actually put me through my training. And right now I am a student air traffic controller, so I do control the traffic around Biggin Hill. Perhaps if you have ever been flying in the area, you might have even heard me. But I will put it out there, I am currently just a student. I haven't validated yet. Hopefully that is on the horizon for me in the future, however. But I will go into a little bit more of that journey in a little bit. Now, I feel I've bored you all enough about me, and I want to talk a little bit more about air traffic. Okay, so this is just a bit of a brief summary. There's a couple of slides I just want to go over to explain air traffic control, what it is we do, and almost why we do it. So it all stems from an umbrella term referring to, you might hear as ATM, or air traffic management. Okay, it's essentially looking at how can we make sure that when we put all of these planes up in the sky, how can we keep it safe? How do we make sure that they don't crash into one another? Okay, and we split it into several different things. But the definition is ensuring that the safe and efficient movement of aircraft during all phases of operation. Now, it splits into air traffic services, and that's where air traffic control comes into. So we have air traffic control services, air traffic advisory services, flight information services, and alerting services. Now, that all probably sounds like an absolute load of rubbish to a majority of you. I'm sure some of you will know what those are. But the thing to note there, that's where the people who speak to the planes come in. Okay, that's where the communications between aircraft and those controlling them. You then also have air traffic flow management. So those, unfortunately, are the people that delay you from getting on holiday sometimes. Those are the people that are going to put in your slots and slow you down and mean that you can only depart or arrive at an aerodrome at a specific time. But they have a very important job. They're able to predict what is going to be happening in the future and make sure that they delay all of those things from happening. So perhaps they make sure you take a slightly longer route, but it essentially means that they're going to stop too many planes all arriving in the same bit of air at the same time. The kind of stuff that they are able to do is incredible, and definitely worth looking into if perhaps you have that kind of problem-solving brain. And then the other side of it is airspace management. So hopefully most of you have gone through perhaps you're leading, you've heard more about airspace, you know a little bit more about it. Perhaps some of you do fly and you know a lot about airspace. But essentially what we do is we break up the air above us into different levels, different sections, and we class them as different kind of control levels. So some of them are really, really restrictive. And even if an aircraft went into there, it would be big problems and would probably scramble the jets to go find them. Whereas there are other spaces of air above us, which are really unrestrictive. So you can do whatever you want in them to a certain extent. Okay, if you want to go too crazy, you probably have to speak to the CAA for that. So that's air traffic management. That's how we split it up. But the important one, my favourite bit, air traffic control. So what is air traffic control? So air traffic control, unfortunately, it breaks down even further. You'll find a lot of things in aviation. You'll have these terms that just keep splitting off. Okay. Now, air traffic control falls under air traffic control service. Now, depending on what kind of service you're providing, depends on what we refer to it as. So we have different control services at an aerodrome level. So ground or tower or even air in some places. So those are the people, when we refer to ground, those are the people that are looking at all your vehicles, they're looking at all of your aircraft that are taxiing around, you're looking at your aprons, and they're going to make sure that nobody crashes into them. Okay, nobody ends up in the same place at the same time. They're all holding, giving way, making sure that there is a good, efficient flow of traffic. Now, those ground controllers, sometimes we put all of these terms together. Okay, if it's a quiet aerodrome, or perhaps there isn't a lot of taxiway networks, we might just combine it into one term. So it might just be tower. So at Biggin Hill, we are just Biggin Tower. All right, we don't have the need for ground right now. And tower is essentially looking at everything within a close vicinity of an aerodrome. Now they're going to look at everything in an air traffic kind of circuit. Hopefully most of you have heard of circuits before. So that's that kind of racetrack pattern around your aerodrome. They're going to keep everything in that pattern, and slightly further out, they're going to keep it safe. Okay, they're going to control that. And the key thing with this is air traffic control. Now, that means that everyone must have two-way comms, unless there are a couple of exceptions to that, but they need to be talking to each other, and the pilots have to abide by what controllers are telling them, because if they don't, there's a risk of collision. Okay, the controller's got the full picture of everything that's happening around the airfield, so they want to keep everyone safe. So going back to that tower phrase, that's everyone slightly further afield from the circuit pattern, but we're talking within a couple of miles. So at Biggin Hill, I'll be speaking when I'm on tower to all that traffic in the circuit, but also everything on the ground. Now, you've also got approach. Now, I'm sure a lot of you would have heard of radar. So Heathrow radar, or perhaps even director in some places, or an approach. Okay, these are your people that are going to look a little bit further afield. These are going to be all of the people that are going to be integrating, so making sure, once again, you get a good order of traffic. You're going to integrate the traffic and get them in a nice sequence. Perhaps they are departing or arriving, but that is another type of air traffic control service. And then even more so, you can have an area controller. Now, I must note, I'm not a radar controller, nor am I an area controller. So if you all start asking me loads of questions on those, I'm really sorry, I will not be able to answer those. Okay, you'll find that each controller will specialize in something. They'll either be an area controller, they might just be an aerodrome controller. Some people do actually do tower and radar, but that's just not something we have a big in at the moment. But area controlling is looking at everything in the gaps between airspace, usually quite up high. Okay, there's going to be big sections of airspace right up there, so you'll see all of your aircraft going overhead at 38,000 feet. There'll be an area controller, okay, speaking to them, making sure that that area is safe, and once again, nobody is going into each other. Now, I wanted to add that not all aerodromes are controlled. Okay, only specific aerodromes that have air traffic controllers will be controlled, and even sometimes they can be scheduled. So it could be controlled just between specific hours in the day. So some of you might have been flying and you've spoken to, for example, Blackbush Information. That's an airfield near Farnborough. They are FISO, that's Flight Information Service Officer. And what they do is they control everything on the ground, but when it comes to actually being in the air, so that tower function we were speaking about, that's all put on the responsibility of the pilot. Okay, they become responsible for ensuring they don't crash into anyone, in the sense of they will just advise, they will just provide information on other traffic in the area. Okay, so they can't clear things to take off or land, they can just give them any traffic, give them the wind, and leave it up to them. So they control things on the ground, but not in the air. And when it comes to air ground, that's another step down in terms of control. All they do is they just provide information. So one that's close to my heart, you've got Northfield, so Northfield Radio. All they'll do, if I was to go flying, if I was to say I wanted to taxi somewhere, they would just say, Roger. They'll just acknowledge it, and they'll tell me if there's any traffic that might get in the way of that. All right, so not all aerodromes are controlled. So what's the objectives? Okay, why do we have air traffic control specifically? And this is all really important stuff. We have manuals that are written that we are expected to learn to quite a strict level, which is something that I'm in the process of doing, making sure that I know it as well as I possibly can do for my aerodrome. And what I must note is that every controller, they become valid at their specific aerodrome. I couldn't just suddenly start controlling at another aerodrome. I couldn't just jump in at Gatwick without a safety controller or an instructor with me, because I would have to learn everything all over again. Every airport has their specific ways of doing things. All right, so the objectives. Now, I'm sure you can all read, but I'll read these out to you just to give you a bit more information. So preventing collisions between aircraft. That's pretty straightforward. I'm sure most of you get that one. You're having a very bad day if that was to happen. So we do absolutely everything we can in our power to prevent collisions. Okay, not only are aircraft our responsibility, but we're also going to prevent collisions between aircraft on the manoeuvring area. So that's all of your taxiways, your roads on your aerodrome, and obstructions in that area. So there might be something in the way, there might be some work in progress. You're going to make sure that you prevent collisions between aircraft. You're not going to take them directly head on to something that could cause harm. Okay, you're going to expedite and maintain an orderly flow of air traffic. Expedite is just the term used for making it as quick as we can, but safely. Okay, and maintain an orderly flow. So you're not going to put all of your really slow aircraft right at the front of the queue, which is going to cause significant delays for aircraft that are stuck behind them. Because once again, it's not very expeditious and it's not very orderly either. Okay, we're also going to provide advice and information useful for the safe and efficient conduct of flights. So if we heard that an aircraft wanted to take off to go to a specific aerodrome and we knew that they were closed, but we said nothing, it's not going to be very helpful, is it? Because they're just going to have to come back to us. Okay, so we will help. We would give advice, we will give information wherever possible. If a pilot was to call up and say, do you have the weather for this aerodrome? we would do everything in our power to make sure that we can provide that information. Because at the end of the day, and I think a lot of people, especially when they start learning to fly, they think that air traffic is this big scary thing that you can only use specific phrases. That's not true. We are here to help and advise and give information and prevent collisions. All right. We're there to help. So people can call us up whenever they want. Perhaps they're not sure about something, they want some clarity, they need some advice. We're not a therapy service, but we will do everything in our power from an air traffic perspective that we can do to help. All right. Or we will try and find the right person or the right frequency for you to speak to someone. We will also notify appropriate organisations, and this is quite a long one, but it's essentially saying if there was an accident, if someone went missing, we would notify the appropriate people. All right. So if we notice an aircraft went missing, or perhaps we did have a suspicion that there had been an accident, we can initiate search procedures. We can speak to people that are down at Swanwick that deal with any distress or diversions. They will have a look for us. Okay, they will give us a hand, and they will start the searches for us. Okay, so we have lots of responsibilities, lots of objectives, lots of things we're always working towards, but those are the main things that we live by. All right, so in more of a simple, straightforward way, and this is, once again, this is my experience from air traffic at Biggin Hill. What we do is we keep aircraft safe, we keep personnel safe on the aerodrome. Okay, so not just in the aircraft, we're talking of vehicles or even on the apron. We're going to coordinate with everyone on the aerodrome, and we're going to complete MET observations. Now, that's something a lot of people forget that we actually do as air traffic. We actually complete the observations. Some of you might hear METARs. We actually fill them out, we send them out so that everyone is aware of what's happening with the weather situation. So from a tower perspective, putting it simply, that's what we are doing. Now, Biggin Hill specific, that's where I'm based. I did say I live in Essex, so I actually live north of the Thames. The commute isn't too bad, but you'll see Biggin Hill located on the map there. Now, it's a bit of a mystery aerodrome. A lot of people aren't aware that it actually exists. So Biggin Hill has actually been around since World War II. We had Spitfires operating out of there throughout World War II. It was actually a really important base for the RAF for actually dispersing Spitfires. And we actually still have one of the old huts and some of the old hard standings that the Spitfires used to sit on. We also have the old RAF base still there. Some of you would have heard of officer and aircrew selection. That used to be done at Biggin Hill as well. Okay, it was a really, really important base until the RAF eventually decided that it wasn't actually feasible for them to keep it open, and it became part of the private world of aviation. So the kind of things that you would see operating there, you're looking at your private business jets. So we don't do any commercial flights. You won't ever see EasyJet or British Airways or any of that. We only look at charter stuff. So perhaps for some of you football fans, we've had Liverpool fly out of there. I've definitely seen their buses, Manchester United, all of the people that come down to play Crystal Palace, they'll fly into us. I've seen Formula One drivers. I have seen various singers. For example, Stormzy was just in there the other day. But the whole point of Biggin Hill is it's a bit of a hush hush kind of aerodrome, in the sense that we don't make a song and dance about who is coming in and out. It's for almost those people that have the money to just get into London quite quietly and discreetly. We also provide a helicopter service that will fly you directly into London in 6 minutes. So it has a great selling point. All right. But we do also have a couple of other things happening there. We have Spitfire flights that happen pretty much daily. We also have all of the training aircraft. So all of your Cherokees that you might be doing your initial lessons on, or perhaps they're doing some later lessons. Although we don't actually really endorse circuits at Biggin Hill, just due to the nature of how busy it is and some of the airspace that surrounds us. So we're quite a unique aerodrome. And now what I will say is every aerodrome is different. So if you were to go into the world of air traffic, just because you work at one aerodrome does not mean that you'll instantly click with a different aerodrome. It depends on the kind of traffic that you would want to work. So perhaps if you just wanted to work commercial jets and you wanted the bigger the better, then somewhere like Heathrow or Gatwick, that is the place for you. But if you're looking at perhaps you want a little bit more of a challenge in the sense of integrating quick and slow traffic, somewhere like Biggin Hill or Farnborough even, or even Southend. And I must apologise, I know the South a lot better than I know the North. So I'm probably going to use a lot more reference to the South. Okay. So that's Biggin Hill. All right. Biggin on the bump. Some people refer to it as it is actually on a hill. Now, airspace. Now, a lot of you will probably think this is unreadable. This is very confusing. This is a chart. So this is something that a pilot would fly with. And this is essentially just giving you information on airspace. Now, for those of you that can see it, Biggin Hill is located pretty much in the centre. All right, you'll see some rather large, and I have a feeling you won't be able to see my mouse, so I'll use my best description. That is the southeast of England. You will see the River Thames going about 2/3 of the way up. You'll see it coming in. So you'll see Essex above it. You'll see it lead to London City, and then to the left of that, you'll see Heathrow. And then further south, you'll see Gatwick. Biggin Hill is located in between those two. Now, what I will say, this is quite an old chart, but this was the best image I could find to really give you a clear picture. I'm sorry that it's not the most up-to-date. The reason I know it's not the most up-to-date is because of the classification of airspace that Heathrow is. You'll see that round Heathrow, so that's in the top left-hand corner, the big almost rectangle looking with curved sides. You'll see it's got loads of A's in it. That's saying that the airspace is class A. That's the most restrictive. Now, Heathrow is actually class D now. The other big significant change you'll see is over in the top right-hand corner, and that's Southend. They have a lot more airspace than that now. You'll see there's just a little circle around it at the moment, but it's a lot bigger now. Now, you'll notice Biggin Hill in the middle, we don't actually have any controlled airspace. We don't have any of those letterings around us. And the reason we don't have that is simply because of how busy it is in the south already. For us to have airspace, it would be pretty useless because London City and Gatwick would steal a lot of it. So we work with what's called an ATZ, an aerodrome traffic zone. Okay, and we have that. So although it's not controlled airspace in the usual sense, to enter an air traffic zone, or to do anything in one of those, an ATZ, you'll hear it referred to, you need permission. So you can't just go into it, okay? And it's put in place to protect your aerodrome traffic. So that just stops anyone wandering through, okay? If they were to go in, it would be an infringement and you can get into trouble for that. And there's always a way to work out who it is. So don't think if you just turn all your transponder off, we won't know. We definitely will do. So don't get any ideas about that. But every airport which is controlled will have an aerodrome traffic zone. Okay. If they are air ground, they won't. All right, because it's a lot less restrictive. So that's Biggin Hill. You can already start to see it's a bit of a complicated aerodrome just due to the lack of controlled airspace, its placement between some major London airports, and it's on a hill, which makes it interesting when the cloud is pretty low. Now, air traffic at Biggin Hill. Once again, I want to emphasise that it's different in every aerodrome, but this is what Biggin Hill looks like from the tower. Now you'll see that there are 3 seats. On the right-hand side, we've got the tower controller. On the left-hand side, we've got the approach controller. And then the chair closest to us with all of the colourful strips next to them, that is where the assistant sits. Now, once again, I'll just kind of reiterate, the assistant is there to act as essentially an admin assistant. So they will make sure that everything is prepared for the controllers. Those colourful strips next to the assistant, that's how we represent our traffic at Biggin Hill, and a lot of aerodromes still use this as well. The bigger airports like Heathrow, I believe even Gatwick, they actually use an electronic version, which is really, really cool. But just because of the traffic that we have and how unpredictable it isn't always the best option. You'll find that some things with air traffic, we kind of stick to the old-fashioned way because we know it works. You wouldn't want to be controlling and the screen suddenly turn off or your pen suddenly stops working on your screen. So at Biggin Hill, we've still got those strips that we print out and put in front of the controllers. Now we use different colours to represent different things, blues being departures, yellows being inbounds, and pinks being locals. All right, so local being departing from Biggin and returning to Biggin. There won't be landing anywhere else. So the assistant will do all of those things. They'll answer the phone, they'll answer emails, they'll respond to bookouts, allowing the controllers that opportunity to just focus on the traffic. So tower, once again, they're speaking to everything on the ground. They are responsible for the movement of vehicles. And they'll also speak to everything in that close proximity, in that ATZ. Okay, now we've used that term and we know what that is. So within that small circle around an aerodrome. Whereas the approach at Biggin Hill, they'll speak to everything further out. They'll integrate any of our traffic in or out to make sure they don't become a collision to somebody else. And they could be speaking to anyone as far out as perhaps the Thames. So quite far, actually, they will be speaking to people, which makes it really, really interesting. And when it's quieter, right at the beginning of the day and right at the end of the day, we'll actually combine it. And approach will do everything from ground all the way out to the Thames or quite far southeast. And that's Biggin Hill. So it's a nice little tower that does everything we need it to do. Now, there is loads of equipment in there, and I wish I could go through all of it, but I don't have forever. So, Biggin Hill, this is what it looks like. This is the layout, and I must put it out to all of you that all of this information it's public, all right? You can look up any of this anywhere. So, Biggin Hill, we've got 1 runway, you've got 2-1 and 0-3. Okay, we only have 1 instrument approach into Biggin Hill at the moment, and that is on runway 21, which makes it really, really fun when the wind is not favouring that runway. It makes for some complicated situations. Oh, I'm going to pause 1 second, just whilst I make sure that my computer is plugged in. Cool. So yeah, we've got 1 runway. We've got various different taxiway networks, which make it good to problem solve if you've got aircraft that want to go perhaps opposite direction. You'll notice that at airports you can't get aircraft like on a road going both ways. As soon as you've got one on the taxiway, you won't be able to get another one past it. So if you do get a situation where they want to go opposite direction, you've got to think pretty quickly to work out a solution to that. Okay, we also have a Foxtrot helipad. So Foxtrot being the taxiway that it's on, it's right at the bottom of the airfield layout. You'll see it actually pointed out next to the big red circle. So you can see all of these for every airport. If you're ever interested on how to find the airfield layouts, you're curious to see what it looks like, you can actually look it up. It's in the CAA. If you look up the AIP, you can go through the air rack. All sounds like a lot of words. You can note it down and it will actually bring up a little display and it will show a list of aerodromes on the left hand side and you can get up all of this information. It's what pilots use to make sure that they have all the up-to-date information when they are flying in and out of airports. All right, and that's just for the UK, I should specify. So this is actually quite a simple layout. Bigger places will have a lot more taxiways and make it a little bit more complicated, but also sometimes easier because they've got more routes to take. Now, a typical day at Biggin, I've actually managed to get hold of a little clip so you can hear some of the things that are going on. Now, what I will do is I will try to pause it in places to explain what is happening and you can start to build up a picture of perhaps what it sounds like. Now, just to add this picture, unfortunately it's not a video, this was done to celebrate someone who was involved with D-Day. So you've got a Learjet on the left-hand side, which flies out of Biggin Hill quite a lot, and then you've got the famous Spitfire on the right-hand side. So let me play this clip.
Two depart to runway 21, 2400, 3445 for Victor Tango Bravo 400. 400 correct, hold Foxtrot 1.
So that there, you've got a clearance. So we've got an aircraft that's heading out somewhere. All they're doing is they're reading back a clearance. The controller said correct, and they've told them to hold position because there's clearly something in the way.
Time now, altitude 3,000 feet. Altitude 3,000 feet. 3 hours.
Now that aircraft has been told to climb further, so they've just departed off one of our runways, and they've got clearance to go a little bit higher. All right. What I will add, I believe this is just tower only. So once again, thinking about this is everything in the close vicinity and just on the ground. There is a whole another load of conversations happening on the other side of the room with the approach controller.
Runway 21, we will be ready on turnaround. Victor Tango Bravo 400. 400, enter runway 21, Foxtrot 1, backtrack, line up on way. Backtrack, line up and wait, runway 21, Victor Tango Bravo 400.
Now, at the beginning of that transmission, you would have heard there was a bit of a horrible sound. We called it a heterodyne. Now, that just means that two aircraft are both trying to speak at the same time. But it's actually a really, really useful tool. Sometimes you'll be able to hear some of the voices, so you can tell the aircraft that two of you were trying to speak at the same time, and then you can try and pick out one of the messages so that you can continue with it. If not, they have to fight it out again, essentially. And one of them, they just have to be a little bit more cautious about who is speaking. But you'll be surprised how often pilots like to speak over each other, despite doing that as their day job. I don't know why, that just it tends to be the case. Now, the other thing that the controller has added in there, so they've told them to backtrack one of the runways and to line up and wait. Okay, so backtracking, they're just going to go down the entire length of the runway, turn around, and then line up at the end, ready to go.
Stand by.
Now, the use of the word standby, that's clearly, once again, the controller is busy doing something. And something to add for those of you who haven't been in a tower before, just because we're not speaking does not mean that we are actually able to answer a call at that time. So that controller might have been on the phone to someone, they might have been speaking to the assistant to organise something, they might have been speaking to the approach controller, discussing some kind of what we refer to as coordination. So making sure that we've got a good order of our traffic and we're integrating it correctly.
Bravo, contact 7 radar, 138.025 today. 138.025. Bye-bye.
Handing it to another frequency.
Five Golf, hold position. Hold position. Holding point Delta 2, runway 21. Delta 2, 21.
So right now there's a lot of taxiing going on around. So the controller will be looking at the situation, making sure the various aircraft are getting out of the way until they move something. Okay, you don't want to taxi something out in front of another aircraft, and then it causes problems.
Charlie, give way to the Embraer, taxi holding point Alpha 1, runway 21, 5 Foxtrot 2, Alpha 4. Charlie, Beacon Tower.
So you would have heard a minute ago, the controller actually gave an instruction to one of the aircraft to give way to said aircraft and then continue their taxi. Now they didn't respond. The controller needed to do something else, so they quickly told the other aircraft to change frequency, and now they're going back to them. Now it's quite useful. You would have done it in your radio work before, but we just do a radio check with them just to double check they're actually listening out to us, because sometimes pilots can be busy. They might be briefing before their flight, and sometimes they just tune out to us accidentally. It's not a problem, but if we need to get a message to them, we will go back to them and just give them a couple of nudges to make sure they are listening to us.
Point Alpha 1, runway 21. Alpha 5 Charlie, register Alpha 1 for 21. Alpha 1 421, last night by November 20.
Hello, Delta Zulu Yankee.
Delta Zulu Yankee, big and tower. Call back in about 5 minutes. Just got the workload quite high at the moment.
Okay.
So an important tool that we'll use as well is we will always give everyone the picture of what's happening. So if it is too busy to be able to speak to an aircraft at the time, we'll just give them a heads up. Look, it's really busy at the moment. It's really important for a controller to be able to manage their workload. And if they keep saying yes to everybody, it's not going to be safe, it's not going to be orderly, and it's not going to be expeditious. It's just going to slow everyone down. There is no point having an aircraft running sat at a hold when they could have delayed it 5 minutes and got them going straight away. So we're always looking at things like that.
Lorenz, when you're ready. Go ahead with the clearance, the Hamburg 7 go. The Hamburg 728 Golf hold position. This will be a lid to standard departure route. Climb to altitude 2,400 feet, squawk 7702.
Lid to standard departure route 2,400 feet, squawk 7702, Hamburg 7 go. We're holding position, Hamburg 7 go.
Off Mike, Bravo. Bravo, can you call back in 5 minutes? Bravo.
That's one of our Spitfires.
What do you mean, Delta 3, runway 21?
Taxi Delta 3, runway 21, Mike, your taxi.
And there we go. So that's a typical day at Big N. It can get really busy. And the thing with air traffic is 1 second you could be doing nothing, and the next minute, you never know, everyone wants to go flying. And it makes it quite fun. So why be an ATCO, an air traffic control officer? Okay. And these are just some of my personal opinions. Everyone will give you a different opinion, but I'm yet to speak to an air traffic controller that hasn't enjoyed their career. No 2 days are ever the same. If you want a job that is always going to keep you on your toes, you're constantly going to be problem solving, air traffic is definitely the one for you, because you're never going to have the same sequence of aircraft the same day. The weather's going to change things. The day of the week is going to change things. You'll find that some days are naturally busier than others, and it makes it really, really interesting, because you never know what's going to happen when you turn up at work. There is great job security in the sense of air traffic, because everyone needs an air traffic controller. At the end of the day, you always need someone at the other end of that frequency that is able to give instructions. There are amazing benefits that come with being an air traffic controller. I'll be very transparent with you. I get 33 days of annual leave each year, and that's only on the days that I'm working. So I work a pattern of 4 days on, 2 days off. So I could take those 4 days off and I'll have 8 days off. All right. So there's loads you can do with it. It gives you loads of opportunities. It's well known that air traffic controllers are actually paid really, really well. And that's even on even when you first start, when you're a student or a trainee. But it all does depend on how many ratings you have to your name. And by that, I mean, if you're tower only or if you're radar only, it will change what your kind of salary is. Also, how busy your airport is, that will also determine the kind of salary and also some of the benefits that you have. And you never take your work home with you. Okay, it's not like school or an office job where perhaps you haven't finished that assignment. You're going to have to take that work home with you to make sure it finished, you get it done by that set time. It's not going to happen. As soon as it becomes the time when you are rostered to finish, you'll hand over to another controller, you'll unplug, and you'll go home. That's it. All right. Now, there are some things to consider. We do have annual checks where to make sure that we are current, that we are following procedures correctly. So you might have to do a bit of studying for that. You're always going to have to make sure that you are up to date with everything that's happening at your aerodrome. But once again, that gets factored into the hours that you work. So you should always have the time to do that. But I love it. I finish from work. So, for example, I was working today. I finish, I can come straight to cadets. I don't need to worry about what happened at work today. You leave it there. Okay. So, how do you get into air traffic? Now, I mentioned how I got into it, and I'll give you a little bit more information in a second. But one thing I do want to note, you don't need any specific qualifications. In fact, at Biggin, we do actually have some controllers that don't really have any GCSEs to their names. And that shouldn't be a concern to you because it takes a very specific set of skills to work in air traffic. And that doesn't necessarily mean that you need to be book smart. Now, what I will add is a lot of airports are actually adding that you need a specific number of GCSEs to your name. At the moment, you have to forgive me, I'm not very good with the numbering system. I worked off ABC when I was in school, but it's essentially C or above, and you need 5 GCSEs to your name for most airports. Okay, now the ways to get into air traffic, these are the well-known ways to get in. And what I would say is, even by saying well-known, not a lot of people know how to get into air traffic. It is a little bit of a mystery. So hopefully this will clear things up for you. The first way, and the way that I did it, is becoming an assistant first. So you don't need any formal qualifications. All they want to see is that you're interested in aviation, you've got that commitment to it, and that you kind of have that problem-solving brain. So they'll want to see times where you've worked in a team, which is awesome. For all of you in cadets, you can show already that you're interested in aviation, you have that passion, you can work in a team. And the other thing they like to see is that you're good at communicating. Okay, once again, making reference to cadets, I would imagine all of you are very good at communicating. So you can tick all of those boxes straight away when it comes to the interview. What I would say is, if you do get the opportunity to interview for any of these things, make sure you've researched what it is that you are applying for. And I include the airport as well in that. So when I applied to be an assistant at Biggin, do your research into that airport. I looked into Biggin, I looked at what future things they were going to be partaking in, and it showed that I had that interest and that drive to work at that specific airport. Okay, so I got the job as an assistant. That then opened the door. I worked there for a year and a half, and then the head of our unit, so the head of air traffic at Biggin Hill, turned around and said, I think you've got potential. Okay, we'd like to make you become a controller. So what they did is they actually paid for, they gave me a wage, a salary whilst I was away. They sent me to Gloucester for around 8 to 9 months where I did my training. So you have to do your basic training and then your specific rating training. So that might be tower or radar or even approach procedural, for example, or even area, if that's the route that you take. So they sent me on a basic, a tower, and a approach procedural course. So I was away in Gloucester, I was getting paid, they paid for my food, they paid for my accommodation, they sorted me out, and now I'm back at Biggin Hill as a student air traffic controller. So I have a student license to my name, and I'm able to use my license to practice, essentially. So I sit with an instructor back at Biggin Hill, they make sure that what I'm doing is safe, orderly, and expeditious. And then when I've got enough hours to my name, I will sit a validation and then I'll be signed off as an air traffic controller. Okay, and that's the same in all of these routes. Wherever you go, you will always come back from college, you will do your specific unit training, so your specific airport training, and then you'll have the opportunity to validate if they think that you have ticked all the boxes and that you'll be fine by yourself. Okay, you are never thrown in the deep end, especially in this job. So becoming an assistant is one opportunity if that airport tends to put people through. So I know some of the airports in the vicinity of Biggin that also put people on courses. So Lid, Southend, Shoreham, they all pay for people to go on courses. Okay, a lot of airports quite like to, they refer to it as home growing, making sure that they have people that are committed to that airport, and that's how they'll bring them in. Another opportunity, I made reference to college. Okay, there is one college in the UK that provides air traffic control training. It's called Global ATS, and it's based at Gloucester Airport. So you could self-sponsor. Now, a lot of these courses, unfortunately, they're not cheap. Okay, where they are the only course, the only college that run it, unfortunately, it makes it a little bit expensive. To self-sponsor yourself through basic and tower, you're probably looking at the best part of around £30,000 to £40,000. Okay, so the idea of becoming an assistant becomes quite a good one when you know you don't have to pay it. What I should add as well, if you do get sponsored through by an airport like myself, you might get bonded to that airport. Now, that's not anything to fret about. A bond is just saying that, okay, I promise to stay with this airport for this many years. If I leave any sooner, I'll just have to pay for some of the costs that you paid for me. All right, so you might get bonded. But it's definitely not a bad thing, because you wouldn't find air traffic controllers jumping between lots of units, because that would mean lots and lots of training. So going back to self-sponsoring, you could just pay for yourself to go through training at Global ATS in Gloucester. And from that, you could then directly speak to airports that perhaps need controllers, and you can say, look, I've got my student license, I'm ready to be trained up. That's another option if you don't want to wait. The other thing, blip driving. Now, we refer to them as blip drivers because on a radar screen, you see little dots. Now, a blip driver is someone that runs the other side of a simulation at the college. So they act as the pilots in these simulations and assist with the training of controllers. Now, you can start at the college as a blip driver, and I've heard it before that if you do a certain number of years with them, they'll actually put you through some of the training, okay, because of your commitment to the college. So that's another way. If you perhaps didn't want to be an assistant, you couldn't afford to self-sponsor, you could start there instead. Perhaps that is appealing to some of you that live closer to Gloucester, as you, of course, would be expected to live in the vicinity. Now, the other option is NATS. A lot of you would have heard of NATS. They do all of the area controlling. They do pretty much, they dominate in the sense of all of the airspace. They manage a lot of the major airports in the UK. So they manage Heathrow, they do Gatwick, Luton, Stansted, all of those kind of major airports. I want to say Aberdeen as one for up north. There'll be a couple of others that unfortunately I won't be able to roll off my tongue as I can do with the south. But they own all of those airports. So perhaps if you said to yourself, I really want to get into air traffic, but I specifically want to work at Heathrow, you would have to join NATS. All right. So they have their own way of applying. I think someone has unmuted themselves. Can you just make sure you're muted, just so I can't hear myself? All right, I don't want to hear any feedback, please. Not yet anyway. So NATS, you will have to apply. If you just look up NATS on Google, they sometimes, well, it's a bit like the RAF with specific roles. They'll open their application forms every now and again, and you'll apply for that. And it will give you the opportunity to go through various levels in the interview process. So you'll have to do like an aptitude test with them. You have to do an interview. And if they deem that you have the skills required, they will pay for you to go through a course. They will support you with your living, but you will be expected to actually arrange it yourself and pay for your own food. And then at the end of it, determining, well, from how well you do at college, you'll put down your preferences of where you'd like to go, and then they'll send you where they have space. Okay, so it's a little bit more of a bit of a gamble as to where you'll end up, but it's not a problem if perhaps you're young and you're happy to work at any airport. NATS is also a really good way to get into air traffic. So there are loads of different options, and it might depend if perhaps you want to stay in a specific area or you want to gain experience at an airport first. What I would say is with all of these assistant roles, you really have to know what you're looking for. Okay, they're quite hard to come by, and the only reason I found the job at Biggin is because I actually looked on the airport website as to what jobs they were advertising for. So perhaps if you are interested in air traffic, you don't want to take the NATS route, keep an eye on the airport websites for the jobs. All right. There are always jobs going around the world and the country, of course. What I should add as well is once you have your air traffic control license, once you've done it at college, that stays with you. Okay, so now that I've done my basic tower and approach, I could actually take those qualifications and I could go work at Heathrow or I could go work at Gatwick. So if the opportunity came up where they opened their doors to external applicants that already had a license, I could apply and I could get going there instead. So all of these things do carry over. All that it would require me to do is just do some training into that specific unit and then do a specific number of hours with an instructor. Now, probably all of this sounds a little bit complicated to some of you, but hopefully this is opened some of your eyes as well into the endless opportunities there are to get into air traffic. And perhaps even some of you, this is the first time you've even considered it as a job role. But if you are interested, what I would say is get yourself a visit at a local airport. Just reach out to the HR teams or the comms teams. You can always send airports a message on DMs, on Instagram, on Facebook. There's always a way to get in contact with them. And I can guarantee if you have an interest in air traffic, any unit would be more than happy to show you up in the tower. Now, it might be a little bit more difficult at some places like Heathrow or Gatwick or any major controlling hubs, perhaps like at Swanwick where they have London City. Okay, places like that, you need to be a minimum age to get in just because of how busy and intense those areas can be. But places like Biggin Hill, if you're local to us and you want a tour, if you're truly interested in air traffic, we'd be more than happy to help and support you with that and actually get you up into the tower. Likewise, I know places like Stansted have supported cadets up into the tower, and also Southend have had cadets up there as well. So get yourself networking. Perhaps if you're younger in the organisation, look at opportunities to expand your aviation knowledge. So have a look at scholarships, even though you might not be interested in that as a career. It could be a way to really expose yourself, and when it comes to your application, it will stand out for sure. Okay. And going back to my cadet career, it was only because of those experiences that I had as a cadet that I got that job in the first place. Okay. And that's what drove some of those key qualities that allowed me then to become an air traffic controller. It was cadets that did that. Okay. So for all of you, keep going with that. And if air traffic is definitely what you're interested in, then I would look at networking and getting yourself into those places and exposing yourself as soon as you can. So that is the end of my presentation. I would like to open up the floor to any questions. Now, I think perhaps the easiest way to do this is if you want to throw any questions into the comments. If you don't have any questions, then that is not a problem at all. That means that perhaps I've done a good job of exposing all of this. And what I would say is if you do want to contact me in the future, then there is a couple of ways to do it. I can put my details either in the comments if any of you feel that would be useful. Just let me know, or I can make sure that it gets added to Cadet Portal. So, are there any questions? What I will do is I will stop sharing. We can go back to the page and then hopefully I'll be able to see any of the messages. What is it like as a traffic? I absolutely love it. So I've already mentioned some of the perks of being an air traffic controller. Like day to day, it's different. You're working with a team of like-minded people. It makes it incredibly fun, even in the busy, stressful moments. I'm sure a lot of you would have heard of how it can be quite a stressful job, and that's more just to do with the responsibility that you have. When you deep it a little bit and you think, oh gosh, these people are actually like my responsibility, but you have so much training that you don't worry about that. But honestly, since I got involved in air traffic, I've never looked back, and it was definitely the best option for me. Do you think you might go to one of the bigger airports such as Gatwick. I would actually love to one day. Now I spoke about how Biggin is tower and approach only. What I would love to do one day is I would actually like to perhaps look at getting a radar qualification. So whether that's I go to a neighbouring airport, I go to Southend, or perhaps if I decide radar isn't actually feasible, then yeah, I'd love to go to Gatwick. The thing with Gatwick at the moment is they're NATs, so I would have to wait until the application's open for external controllers. All right, but I decided that sticking with Biggin was the best opportunity for me because of job security and the support that they were giving me throughout that process. What GCSEs did I take? So I actually did GCSEs and A-levels, and I'll go into them as well. So I went a little bit rogue with my GCSEs. So in terms of the options that I took, well, I did triple science. I did your usual, your maths, your 2 Englishes. I did French, although hasn't helped me in life too much, but it's always good to have under your belt. I did history. I then did dance. I did classical civilization. And there's definitely another one, but I can't think of it. Okay, in terms of A-levels that I did maths, I did physics, I did chemistry. At the time, I was still a little bit unsure about what route I was going to take, so I thought those were the options that best suited all of perhaps the things I was looking into. So whether that was joining the RAF or it looked into perhaps STEM. And at one point I was considering perhaps doing an engineering degree because I knew that wherever I went to, it would look really good. And it comes back to there is no, obviously it would be very supported if you want, if you wanted, or if you went to university and you did a degree, there's nothing stopping you from doing that. And then if you were later on in life to decide that you wanted to become a controller, that's still very, very achievable. Okay, we have some controllers up in the tower as well that have all sorts of degrees from like geography to air traffic management. Okay, and what I should add as well, if there aren't opportunities to become an assistant, and perhaps that's the route you wanted to take initially, have a look at other jobs that the airport's also putting out. So some of our controllers, they started off as aircraft handlers, or even some of them even started in duty free as part of that. So there are always loads of options. What I would say is if air traffic is definitely the thing for you, then have a look if there's a job role. If perhaps it's not available straight away, have a look at a job role that will actually give you some experience in a nearby field and will give you that exposure. Perhaps you could work at an airport and you could try and get yourself mingling with those in the air traffic unit and give yourself those opportunities. I would love to visit any squadrons. If you would like me to come down, obviously Essex is where I'm based. Even if it's down in Kent or anything like that, I would love to come down and do specific talks with any squadrons. Just give me a shout. Easiest way to contact me is through 106. That is my squadron. I'm the training officer, so training.106, or even amelia.jones100@RAFAC. Always to contact me, just drop me an email. And if there's anything I can do, I can support. What has your biggest challenge been from becoming a cadet up until now? My biggest challenge was definitely that period of time when I was cabin crew and I wasn't too sure what to do with my life. I think probably most of your parents, guardians, even other people, they'll say to you, it doesn't matter about what you do in the future. It's fine, just pick at some point. But actually making that decision, it's really, really hard because there are so many options out there. And until you've tried something, you don't really know. So that was probably the biggest challenge, is trying to find my feet in the actual working world after I decided not to go to uni. All right. But in terms of overcoming that, it's all about just trying to work out where your passions lie and work out what you would want to look for in a job. All right. When Quake usually is. So that starts in September. So hopefully the applications will be out in the summer. So it runs from September to April. And you have to commit at least one weekend every month. They are specific weekends. Some of them are, sometimes they are virtually, but majority of them are the entire weekend face to face. And so many messages coming through. This is great. Yeah, so some of them are virtual, most of them are face-to-face, and at the end of it, there is a week-long almost like assessments and also networking that is organised usually in the Easter holidays. So make sure that you do have time to commit to that. With that, I would add, I did Quake whilst I was doing my A-levels at the same time. It is definitely achievable. Okay, don't be put off by it because it is excellent to have on your CV, but do be prepared that there is a lot of work to put into Quake. It is not an attendance course. If it was, it would be far too easy and you'd get a bronze badge from it. Okay, but this is a senior course. It is hard work, but it is one of the best things you can do in the Air Cadets. What did you do at college? So I've already said those are the A levels I did. Would you ever join the military? So I definitely considered it, and what I would say about military controlling is it's a very different way of life, and if you're interested in joining the RAF, there's also a very specific way of life. Okay, I decided that I liked being in the civilian side of things. Military controlling is all about supporting the assets that an airport has. So instead of in the civil world, when we say, you must do this, in the military world, the controller will probably turn around and say, what do you want to do? How can I make it work? Okay, so it's a lot about facilitating the pilots in the military side of things. Okay, the other thing is with becoming a military air traffic controller, your qualification doesn't actually carry out to the civilian world. So when you leave the RAF as a controller, you can't jump straight into a job. You would have to retrain. You'd have to go back to college and cover those aspects again. Now, plenty of people do it. I had people at college on the same course as me. I had 2 people that had just left the military and decided they wanted to keep being a controller. It's not a problem. It gives you a build on, but you do just have to be prepared for that. So I've kind of taken the jump already. I wouldn't join the military now, but perhaps, you know, a couple of years ago, I would have definitely still considered it if I knew that air traffic was the job role that I wanted. And also, I knew that I wanted to have a job that allowed me to stay in one place. So I thought staying in the civilian world, I could kind of settle down in one area, whereas military, you obviously have the expectation that you will move as and when they need you to. All right, so those are the kind of some of the considerations that cross my mind. If you're the kind of person that you're happy to move around, you'd much rather work with typhoons and even being at Bryce with some of the bigger like Atlases and all of those kind of Globemasters. If that's your cup of tea, then go for it. And definitely there are opportunities in the military side of things to work with civilian controllers down at like Swanwick and doing area control and doing perhaps even some of the Royal flights. There are some awesome opportunities and perhaps you'll get the opportunity to speak to a military controller. But if you're not sure which route you wanted to take, what I would do is actually look into organising a visit for both. All right, and speaking to the controllers firsthand to see what perhaps would suit you best. All right. Do you know if some airports do apprenticeships? Yes, they do. It's becoming a bigger thing. So I know that at least 2 airports do apprenticeships. I know that Birmingham recently started doing apprenticeships and also Southend. Okay, and what they do with those is they'll bring you in as an assistant and they will say, if you meet this criteria, so if we think during this apprenticeship that you meet the criteria of becoming an ATCO, we will support you and they'll push you through an apprenticeship. All right, so they are definitely out there, but it's one of those things that it's still very early days with those. So it's not something we do at Biggin, but keep your eyes peeled and see if those opportunities are out there, definitely. Do you still fly? I unfortunately don't. I wish I did, but I am in the process of buying a house. So unfortunately, I decided to put it on pause. Now, for those of you that understand about the PPLs, you do get to keep them forever. It's just my rating on single engine piston aircraft has lapsed. I did do quite a lot of flying after I passed I didn't completely want to let it waste away, so I did my night rating. I managed to build to, I think, around 100 hours, and then I decided to put it on pause. And it's something that I will definitely be picking up in the near future. But at the moment, I've left it to one side. So I used to fly out of North Weald when I came back to Essex after I completed my scholarships up in Dundee, and it is great fun. It's awesome, even just as a hobby. So yes, I will get it back, but I'm not flying at the moment. Most cadets don't get much exposure to flying. So for those of you that don't perhaps have much opportunity for flying and gliding, that's where you definitely should look at the bigger like national events. So where I've mentioned about Quake, that's going to give you great exposure for aviation. Have a look at those big camps, so stuff like RIAT. You'll have the opportunity to speak to those that have been part of perhaps big things. You'll get to speak to QARs if you don't get the opportunity to get on Quake straight away. And what I will add, Quake is hard to get onto. Only, and in its current capacity, only 40 cadets get selected each year, and slightly less than that actually pass each year. All right, so it is hard, okay? But to get yourself onto Quake, you have to show that you have the passion, the drive, and that you've put the effort in prior to applying. All right, so get yourself on something like Quake. Try, if you have the opportunity to go flying or gliding, obviously ask those questions, but with you being a bit further away, look at stuff like RIAT, get yourself on those camps, try and get yourself on something like National Air and Space Camp. That is without a doubt one of the best things you can do. All right, and keep your eyes peeled for stuff like this. All right, perhaps if you even if you don't get much exposure within the cadets for flying and gliding, have a look if perhaps you could volunteer at a local airfield. You'll be surprised how many little airfields are actually around the country, and perhaps you could just go and sweep the hangar. You could help out in that capacity to begin with, and then it will allow you to start networking and kind of building up those kind of those networks. All right, so that's definitely my recommendation. All right, East Bristol. So it says that you're from Bristol, East Bristol Squadron. So definitely there's loads around you that you can get exposed with. All right, don't rely on your squadron to expose you to things. All right, sometimes you do have to push a little bit further afield and try and make connections perhaps with other cadets that you've met. You can see how they have gotten on with that. You also start to see the instruction to aviation ground schools. They're going to get pushed out across the Corps, so hopefully that will give you more and more opportunities to really get involved with aviation. When did I first join the cadets? So I joined when I was 13. This was, showing my age, was back in October 2013. All right, so I've been involved in cadets for a long time. I absolutely love it. Can't get enough of it, which is why I am still in the organisation now. Okay, and it's because I get to see cadets like you push on with their passions, do the things that I used to do, and it is just such an awesome organisation. Do I know if any airfields do work experience? So they definitely do. I would say for most airfields, they probably have quite loose work experience. So it'll be, once again, something that you have to contact them directly. But if you do contact them, they can either, if they aren't the correct person to contact, hopefully they'll push you on to someone else. For example, at Biggin Hill, we do a Futures Week where it not only gives you the opportunity to look at just air traffic, but they'll actually show you all of the different industries that work at Biggin Hill. So something like you'll look at engineering, you'll speak to pilots, you'll speak to air traffic, you'll speak to handling, you'll speak to the fire crews, and it will give you loads of exposure. So definitely just reach out to those airports. If you're not sure if they do it or not, you might as well ask, because if you don't ask, you won't know. Right, definitely get onto that. All right. Did you become an officer? Yes. So if you missed my little introduction at the beginning, I am a flying officer at 106 Orset 100 Squadron down in Essex. And I became an officer because however much I love drill and all of that side of things, I felt that officer was perhaps a little bit more my calling. And I absolutely love it. It's a great process. It's not hard to do when you age out, and it's a great way to keep yourself in the aviation loop, and especially in like the military and cadet side of things. All right. So it's a nice, simple, reasonably easy process. How do you become an officer? So when you age out, if we're talking from a cadet perspective, when you're approaching 20, and I know there's been a lot of changes around this, okay, as to whether you will be, in the RAFAC, cool. So yeah, there's been a lot of changes recently, but reach out to your squadron staff, explain to them when you're reaching towards aging out. Just speak to them, say, look, I want to become an officer. You have to make sure that you've filled in the relevant paperwork. You'll speak to your sector staff usually, have a conversation with them. They all push it on to wing. You'll have to have an interview. And at the moment, I believe you then have a regional interview as well. Okay, at each of those stages, they will ask you all sorts of questions, not only on you, but they'll also look at some of your knowledge. And then from that, if you pass, that's at the point when you will get your officer stripes. And then from that, you have to do various courses at Cranwell before you are signed off as a standard officer in the RAF Air Cadets. I've had one last question in regards to QAIs, then we'll make that the last one, okay, because I can't keep you too long. So what activities can QAIs run at sector level? World's your oyster, okay? So QAIs at any level, you can run whatever. So hopefully you will see, well, I'm hoping most wings do have QAIs, or neighbouring wings have QAIs at the moment. With that, you'll see them run junior quake sessions, so that's stuff that I've run when I was a cadet. So that might be just doing a little bit of basic aerodynamics, a bit of air power, a bit of air traffic, and a bit of flight sim. Or they could just do a one-day event just looking purely at flight sims and developing your skills further. And that's definitely, reach out to your QAIs, perhaps if they haven't organised anything, give them a little bit of a nudge, and I'm sure that they will help you. And even more so, if you need them to come down to your squadron and assist with anything, they should be able to come and help teach any aviation topic that you perhaps are lacking on the squadron. All right, that's what they're there for. That's what we will. That's what we always use them for. Okay, so perhaps when you are a QAI in the future, or I'm not sure, perhaps if you are a QAI at the moment, get helping. All right, reach out to your wing aviation officers, and they will assist you further. All right. Thank you to every single one of you for joining this chat. It's awesome to speak to you all. If you do want to get in contact with me, I've given you my contact details. If there's anything I can help with, even if it's further information, if you need me to help look up any airports or perhaps ways to get into air traffic, or you think of a question, just let me know. I'm always more than happy to help. Hopefully I see some of you in the future at national events. It would be great. Come say hello, and I'll be more than happy to have a chat. But otherwise, I will leave you all to it. If you're at cadets, enjoy the rest of your parade night. If not, I will see you all around soon. Thanks, everyone.